earlier, I've been part of this thing called the Family, which is a cool online magic program, which has given me a magic community finally, because I come from a small group. So it's from a small town. So there's not a lot of dudes that do sleight of hand magic.
Right.
And this guy I look up to, Ben Earl, who runs it, been around doing magic since he's 12, same age as me now. Some kid online on the Discord said, how do I overcome the fact I'm struggling and I can't do this thing sleight of hand wise? I'm really having a hard time. And his response on Discord was just I said, if I jokingly wrote back, if it was like 7 words less, I get this tattooed on my body. You hear how long it is. And so he says, dedicate yourself to a lifestyle of continuous practice. Work tirelessly without any noticeable improvements until you feel demotivated and demoralized. Look at the daunting mountain to climb that looms in front of you and realize that nobody can help you climb it or rescue you if you get lost. Get used to the feeling like giving up at every stage while seeing 1,000 examples of how much better everyone else is than you. It would be insane to continue under such conditions, but accept this reality and continue anyway. Patience is a virtue. This is the way. And I thought, man, that is such a powerful understanding of life. Like, that's not just about a hobby. That's really a great way to perceive the reality of the work.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a full back tat.
Yeah. Maybe even like split it up with your friends, you know,
right, down each of your legs.
I just got a shirt for my birthday that had that quote about here's to the crazy ones, whatever. It's like so much font. It's like this much writing. They got the whole quote, and it was hilarious to put on. People are like, what? That's so much. It's like people have to like run their finger on my chest. It was like really weird.
Remember that Simpsons episode where he had a Mad Magazine fold out on his shoulder blades?
Yeah. T-shirts gone wild.
But excellent point, though. I mean,
yeah, it was really neat.
Who hasn't struggled with not being good at something right away?
And then comparing.
Yeah, who was saying that the other day? People don't fail, they quit.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Right? Like, okay, that hurts.
But the opposite is like some people never quit something they should. And that's the crazy part, is crazy people who never quit when they should actually have the same problem as people who never quit and become successful. So you're like, which one am I?
How do you know?
For me, it's like 1 is diminishing returns. 2 is how do I feel about it outside of that moment? So am I passionate about what I do? Am I trying different things? But you really don't. But there are times where you should quit. Relationships are like that sometimes. When I'm like, are you doing everything you can and it's not changing? Yes. Well, then maybe it's not right. And I always say, like, fit and effort. Effort is controllable, but your fit's not. So you could put in all the education and the work to be successful, but if the market isn't accepting you, maybe that's not the right space for you, or it's not the right time. It doesn't mean. And so you have to know when to let go, right? You have to know when to sell your car when it's turned into a lemon. You got to know, or dump it. You need to know when to leave that relationship that isn't about you. It's tough. Time, maturity, real introspection without attaching your identity. It will allow you to make a choice. But it's never easy.
What about the people who stay attached to it because it's not working? It's like almost a level of self-sabotage, but you're addicted to.
Well, you think it's about you. It goes back to identity. You're like, if I quit, it means I'm a failure. It's like, that's not failure. Only failure that exists is self-failure, when you give up on yourself and you don't try. But if you're trying, it's not working. I mean, it's like the round peg in a square hole concept. It's like, try all you want. You really have to be able to look at it from, like, again, you have to look at it and be like, what am I not doing? What am I not contributing to the situation? Well, if you're like, I've tried it from many different angles, you'll know. I mean, eventually, I love people to try. You learn from those mistakes and those things, and you can take them. So if you quit, you're not starting from zero. You're starting from that experience that you can move forward with, and not think that. But as long as you're not like, oh man, it didn't work out. I'm like, how many billionaires declare bankruptcy a number of times in trying and it not working? So that's not failure. People attach that to their
experience,
right? Like, it's growth. It's trying, and I much rather see someone fail from trying.
It is failure if you don't learn from it.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that's one of my old mentors always said: you don't fail, you learn.
Right.
So you either win or you learn.
Yeah.
But if you don't learn, that's when you lose.
Right. So there it is. I mean, if you've learned as much as you can, I think that's the thing. It's like, if you keep the thing they need to look for is not the thing, but the thing that you should look for is, am I learning along the way and it's not working still? Then maybe it's time to try something else or something, But I mean, I mean, look at the Wright brothers. They're an example of like, it's so tough because you're like, oh, what if they quit? We wouldn't be flying across country, you know? So
But we would. Somebody else would have figured it out.
potentially,
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have been, I guess, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who
Um,
knows?
I saw this post today. Super impactful for how shoddy the post was. But the post said every pothole starts out small
Hmm.
until it gets hit by a car over and over again, gets much bigger, till eventually the cars avoid it.
That's so deep, man.
It took me a second to realize they weren't talking about potholes whatsoever. Because it's just
driving advice.
Right. Yeah. They're doing some construction down the road.
Was advertisement.
Right. Yeah. Michelin. Yeah. Time for a new tire. No, that wasn't about potholes whatsoever. It was about people. And that one tweaked me a little bit on the inside.
Yeah, I can feel that.
It made me realize the amount of times that you get beaten up in life,
Mm-hmm.
and then your choice to let it affect you so much that people start avoiding you, and then you start losing people, and it compounds and gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I experienced that personally. You know, when I went through my darkest phase and started planning my suicide, and then sharing that with people, just being like, I'm looking to exit this experience. So it wasn't like an emotional thing. It was more, well, it wasn't like an emotion in the sense of like, I'm killing myself. It's like this, I was really done with this experience. I decided it was messy and painful and there was no purpose. And I had a lot of the same thoughts that people get stuck in understanding life. And then I started telling people, and there was such weird reactions, or I should say mixed reactions, not so weird, but you never know how people will respond. I didn't really care, but to look back on it, it was like, some people try to rescue you, not many, but they don't know and most people don't know what to say. So that's where the avoidance comes in, and the fear of I'll make it worse. I mean, people are not taught even how to ask people. My first client, I remember, I was at a Starbucks, and there was two women having a conversation. And I was just kind of working on some stuff while I heard them chatting, and she was talking about some really dark stuff. And her friend was encouraging her, and wow, I know you're in a tough spot, and I wish you could love yourself. And I introduced myself and be like, I'm sorry, I was not trying to eavesdrop, but I can hear you speaking, and I help people with this kind of thing. And I'm just curious. I mean, people like you who are going through this often think about committing suicide. Is that something you considered? And she went, yes. And her friend was like, oh, what the hell? Why didn't you say anything? It's like, because it's not usually something people volunteer, and they're really shameful about it. And then what's the response? Usually the response is like, the person's drowning, run away sometimes, and that push off. And that's really tough because, again, I never blamed anybody
in
for
that
that.
time. There's a fear of that response too.
Yes.
Right. Like
what if
I'm going to open up my biggest insecurity and vulnerability right now, and this person may run away.
Yeah. And then now that will just compound how I feel, and I'm already feeling alone and left out and whatever, and those negative feelings. And so it becomes confirmation bias, like no one cares, and why isn't anyone helping me? And I think it's a two-pronged approach. One is, like I said earlier, nobody really understands how to deal with it, so they're afraid. It's trying to like fix. It's like me trying to fix a car with nowhere to start, and so why bother tinkering with it? I'll make it worse. And then the other side is, I don't. A lot of people believe it is someone else's responsibility to save them in that situation, which is tough. And I don't think either one is right or wrong. There's a balanced approach in the sense that we're all wounded. It's our responsibility not to live in that wound, and to find a way to a solution. But even some of the friends in the past I've lost to suicide before I was a coach, they were like, "There's nothing for you in the initial trauma. It's all after you decide to heal that there's support." And in that spot, and so we tried to create something called the happiness switch for a while, where it was like a booklet you would sign off on. We're thinking about bringing it back, where it would be like things that would help you kind of see that you could get through that. Maybe like listening to music that you love, or sleeping, or committing to hydration, committing to eating right, committing to even cooking your favorite meal, seeing pictures of yourself where you were successful prior, and just kind of setting up a first aid kit for yourself. But that's really strategies, compared to what we know now, and understanding like how to avoid that completely. Because when I was suicidal, I was afraid to kill myself. Now I have this understanding that we share, and I'm not suicidal, and I'm not afraid to die, which is weird. But it's not when you realize what the purpose and what we are here, and what life is about, and that it's meant to be challenging. It's only when we take it personally. And so putting that projection on the people, like, no one helped me when I was down, it's like, what did you expect them to do? And would you be willing to receive it? I saw a meme too that said the problem with Hamburger Helper is the hamburger has to want to be helped. And I think that's when you're in a bad spot, often even the friends that do help, because there's great people out there that want to help others, that if you're not willing to receive or hear it because you're in a place of pain, and it's weird how that compounds, because you'll be like, I want to get out of this, but someone will throw you a life preserver and you're like, nah, this isn't it. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's like,
If you're drowning and I throw you a life jacket, will you grab it?
yeah. And even if they do, they're like, well, this isn't buoyant enough, like it's like
Right? It's the wrong color.
because there's something with our brains that like the suffering is part of the wisdom. And so when people say, well, I'm depressed, I'm like, Jim Carrey said, deep rest from trying to be somebody, but we've done work and some small research that was done with some farmers and stuff like that, where doctors were doing, and they saw some guy that had a prosthetic leg, and he was in a rice field and he was getting stuck in the mud and falling out. And he was like, I'm useless. I'm going to kill myself. And they're like, medicate him. And the local Vietnamese doctors were like, no, we don't need that. We have cows. And which intrigued me because I'm like, do they grind them up? Like, what are we talking about?
Hamburger Helper.
Yeah. 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 And it turned out that actually they just offered him a stool and said, if you could milk the cows, would that, could you do that without suffering, like without problems? And he's like, I think so. Within a day or two, the depression went away. And what they surmised was there's a lack of control when we get stuck between kind of two hard choices, or we feel like we've lost control of our lives. That's what can often create depression. And then, so how do we get out? Well, we can empower people to take action by like, what needs to occur for you to not feel this way? Like what would have to change, rather than create hope and help them take action, rather than be like, oh, you don't need to feel that way. Life is worth it. And that's the problem. Most people, when they're trying to talk to someone who's suicidal or and avoid, it's because they don't know what to say. Well, they don't. They want to like fix it and be like, oh, look how much you have to live for. Well, if they felt that way, it's not like they forgot.
Right.
It's just that they're, life is dual sided. Life is beautiful. It's also horrible. It's
Well, and it's hard to put yourself into somebody else's experiences, right? We had a conversation the other day about perspective and perception.
yeah.
And it's one thing to perceive what that person's going through based on what they're telling you and what you've seen, but you can't experience it from their perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can understand that they have a different perspective.
Yeah, and you can realize all pain is kind of not it's equal. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't need to be in someone's shoes to understand their pain, to understand pain sucks. But yeah.
But then, there's also a language barrier that language needs to be learned to be able to have those conversations in an effective way without making yourself the liability or taking on. You once explained empathy to me, and
the difference between compassion and empathy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of heroes out there. There's a lot of people who want to fix and help other people, but the way that we are going about it is, I think you put it, this person's in a hole.
Yeah, I think it was a Brene Brown thing that we got, but we took it the next step is like empathy is like jumping in the hole with them.
Right.
Yeah. And
right.
now there's two people suffering stuck, and you're like, because even if you help them, now you're wearing that. And it's like, it just, or as in the show How I Met Your Mother, where Barney exclaims the chain of screaming, or I don't know if you saw that episode where your boss yells at you, you come home, yell at your wife yells at the kids,
Yeah.
like just like a whole circle that never ends.
Yeah.
It's like a virus. And there's some truth to that. But when you have compassion, and that's what avoids toxic positivity. There's this whole push on social media about like, you can do it and believe in yourself and all that. And it feels good for a sec because it kind of justifies where you are in your identity, but it doesn't solve anything. No one's been transformed by social media. It's a great place to create conversation, but it's a horrible place to try to find the solution. Because if anything, you might see one good post and then, the following three posts are like, my life's not like that, or I'm not beautiful or famous or whatever. And, instant anxiety as it's been coined.
Right. Well, and it's understanding, I think actually you had a situation with this recently. You were telling me about. Do you want to tell that story?
Remind me what you're talking about.
About
totally
with Marshall and watching Dude Perfect.
Oh yeah. That's a great story. Yeah, thank you for bringing that. Yeah, when Marshall was young, he started being really hard on himself. He's only 7 now, but like, he was like 4 or 5, and we, sometimes you'll watch YouTube, within parameters, babysitting with the
iPad parents.
Yeah,
I get
iPad
it.
parents. Yeah. And so I just started seeing that he was really hard on himself. Like he would try to do something in sports or with school or with anything. And he would just be like, I suck at it. He would just lose his temper. And Nicole and my wife looked at each other and like, where is he learning this? Because I don't deal with failure like that. Neither do you. We understand it's part of the process. We don't get upset with ourselves on trying. We started, but then and then I was watching an Instagram video or TikTok probably, and he was over my shoulder, and some guy heaved the basketball full court and missed it by like just a bit, bounced off the rim. And he was in shock. He's like, whoa, he missed it. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, Marshall, that's a hard shot. I mean, guys that are throwing, they're probably hucking it up anywhere between 50 to 100 times. If they hit on the first shot, it's completely luck for the most part, unless it's Steph Curry. And so, so most, that's part of it. And then I realized every video he had witnessed or anything he witnessed is the highlight of life. And he thought the whole world in his learning process at a young age, he thought the whole world was great at whatever they did. And he was the only person that wasn't perfect right away. Wasn't dude perfect right away. And that helping him understand that was a game changer. And it was a game changer for me because we might not see it as one attempt, but we are seeing people's highlights of life. And I like when there's an authenticity to social media. However, I don't want to see people's super highlights all the time or their lowlights. I think it's good to just show as authentic as you can. When someone's like, I'm depressed and I'm on meds, it's like, okay, that's part of your life. And don't be shameful of that. But at the same time, it's like, is it real? And I think the real thing is that most of the times life is great or good. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it sucks. But most times it falls in the parameters of life is life and you're creating it. And it's funny how we advertise how life is so good, or it's starting to become like, you're brave if you share your life, but it's almost like a pity party.
Right.
Rather than,
Yeah. Social media is highlighting the peaks and the valleys.
Really,
and
that's a great way to put it.
The majority of life is lived in between those peaks and valleys. And then, and even understanding that it's great to celebrate a high peak. It's not sustainable.
Yes.
And it's okay to experience a low valley, but that valley doesn't have to feel or be as low as you make it out to be.
Right.
There's comfort in the middle.
And when you realize there's no good or bad, because life has moments of you can feel that way, but you recognize like those things have purpose, and that the bad has often been a setup for something better. Like you lost that job, you're just mortified. Like we talk about when the company gets closed down, and then but that wouldn't then you would have been there for long if that didn't close, and it didn't set the fact you got a better job or something that you love more, or you made more money for a while, like or you leave a partner and you find someone more aligned. But in that moment, it's everything, and we have to kind of look at life at a broader perspective. If you look at anything in micro moments, it's always going to be suffering or
perspective over time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like we talk.
There's a tattoo.
It'll fit.
Yeah.
Perspective over time, and that time gives you perspective.
It does. And that's what's hard when you're young.
Yeah.
You have more ahead of you than you have behind you, and you think everything is in that moment. You compare to people that have homes and this and that. But it's funny, if you ever ask those people. I had someone come in my office the other day and she wants to buy a home, and she sat in my house. She goes, man, your house is amazing. I'm like, you want to buy it? Like, they don't understand like the stress of if you take it, if you're like really scared of ownership, because what do you lose? You lose your home, and something breaks down. You're like, it's more like the responsibility they don't understand. You're like, yeah, everything that's supposed to be what it is creates another problem of your life. And for the people that are minimalist, or they realize that they don't need anything, that they can create, but they don't need it, and they're not attached to it, they all of a sudden have freedom. And that's what we all want to feel, is freedom in the situation. And so it's to go back to what we were talking about earlier, though. It's really tough when we want the world to be there for us when we're feeling alone. And which is why it's so valuable, I think, for people to understand who they are, because then when they do work with us and they see it, then they're like, someone's suffering. We get calls for suicides through friends or like connections where all the time, which is interesting because we don't do that work. We're not compensated for it. It's not part of our business plan. But when I say that, like, I'm happy to help in the situation, but this isn't our work. And they say, well, nobody does what you do. And if they go to a traditional path, there might be on a wait list for a year. I mean, there's no sense of urgency. I mean,
wait list, medication, and no follow-up.
Right. And I always if you're on meds, like, I don't want anyone to think I have any judgment on that when we say that. However, the problem with medication is, one, you habituate to it over time, which means your dose goes up, and number two, it's kind of a guessing game. In other words, if they take my blood because I'm tired and so there's symptoms of, say, scurvy, they'll know I'm low in vitamin C, and apparently I'm a pirate, and so they would give me vitamins.
There's very few hypotheticals now that I want that don't involve you being a pirate.
I'll work on that. And so when someone then you get vitamin C, you're feeling better in a couple of days.
Right.
But if But if you're like, oh, I'm feeling depressed, and you're like, well, what are you low on dopamine, serotonin? They can't take, quart of brain juice and test it, and that's a lot. But anyways, they wouldn't. They're just now they're messing with your brain chemistry, and there's side effects to that. I've seen people who have been happier, but then the side effects is now they're not sleeping, so they go into a funk because now they're biologically suffering rather than just mentally. And so there's a nice dance with that, and I just get really concerned. But no one knows there's a solution out there. And there is
Right.
a solution. The solution is to understand how your experience of life, that you see it as through your beliefs and your personal mind and through your psychology, is interfering with the belief that you need to support your identity because you need to make this life perfect because you only have one shot at it. Oh my gosh, what if I'm nothing? And it proves that this is a meaningless adventure. And then everything on the outside, TV, social, it's telling us we need to be something. And we look at people like who has, and it's tough, who has the most influence in the world? The rich and famous. I mean, it's weird that I can say the things with you today and might impact, a dozen to 30 people. But if Kanye West says it, good or bad, or if, Oprah Winfrey says it, it's changing the world, and they're becoming authorities because of wealth. And so we don't understand that the value of knowledge is really not about popularity, but social proof has become a thing. Social proof, like, oh, if I have 10,000 followers, then what I say is 10,000 or 100 times more beneficial than this guy over here because he doesn't have as many followers. And so we need to really start to understand how to hear information from understanding and not need. If we're looking for the answer outside of us, we'll never find it. But if we understand that the answer has always been inside of us, then we can look at through that lens and understand if we value or not and how to create.
So now let's shift this into a marketing conversation then. How do you bridge that gap where you have this message, you have a system that addresses root cause versus symptoms of depression, anxiety, burnout?
Right.
You have a proven concept amongst a small set of people, but an extremely low failure rate and a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
high
High
success
success rate.
rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
Thanks for noticing that.
well, your Google reviews notice that. I mean,
Thanks. Yeah.
having a substantial number of 5-star reviews from people who have gone through this exact same
Yeah.
thing.
And we love what they write because it's not like Morgan's a good coach. It's like my life is better and for a long time. Yeah. We love that.
Right. So you have this process and you have everything that's proven to work. But you're not Kanye. You're
Yeah.
not Oprah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not giving out humpback whales. You get a humpback whale. You get a. So then it becomes a marketing thing because part of the symptoms that we're talking about is paying attention to success on social media as
Right.
being a problem. But the only way to expand this message currently is, beyond word of mouth, which is powerful but
Yeah.
local,
Yeah.
is social media. So how do you bring that message to the masses
Yeah.
without being a Kanye?
Well, I think the focus is two things. We look to guys like you who know how to help us share who we are, and hope that it creates enough conversation that people start asking questions, because questions create understanding. And there's lots of things that pop up online that nobody follows up and says, "Hey, like, show me, give me a chance." We offer people a free meeting. We want to literally help people, and we're willing to share this message with one meeting. And if you look on one meeting, I know it sounds crazy, but one meeting can change your life. It's
Mm-hmm.
always in a moment where you start to understand there might be something here for me. We want you to go out and go to Tony Robbins and see if it works for you and come back and tell us. We want you to go to therapy, but hopefully, not too long when you realize it doesn't work, and go, why isn't this sticking for me? It does for some, a small percentage, I would say. But the studies show that, like, as we're the most suicidal, what's the word I'm looking for? In society, it's the most suicidal of all time, and we're the most medicated group of people. Like our generation, that's what I was looking for. Our generation's the most suicidal and the most medicated. That doesn't,
Which is wild because we're in the safest period
yeah,
of time in
yes,
history
yes,
ever.
things are amazing.
Things
Everyone's
are
unhappy.
great. Like, yeah, there's isolated conflicts happening here and there,
Yeah,
but
in North America, in the first world country, we've got great things
a
going.
global scale compared to the rest of history,
Yes,
throughout time, people are more safe than they ever have been as a race.
yeah, and that's because sometimes when we're comfortable, it doesn't create change. It's being uncomfortable. And so and then they start looking, right, like nobody moves their hand off the stove if it's not on. But the moment someone turns it on, it's like there's movement. And so, but the second part of the prong approach is really about us. We really are just doing our work. Like we're not looking to be famous. We'd love to be influential and having people know so we can get to the people we need to help and grow that way. However, our job is just to serve and show up in our lives. And it takes time. We have to pay our dues in a way. It's like, it takes time for people to hear that you can make a difference. So, I mean, if we keep doing the work and people see it, then, and that's how we've built our success, in the area and around in Ontario, and even working with people across the world, is that they find out about us and someone says, why are you happy? Well, we met these guys. And so we're lucky that way that we haven't had to market in nearly 5 years, but we recognize we have the capacity to help more. So it's just a matter of time for somebody says, hey, maybe these guys are onto something, or if not, come check us out. We're not looking to prove, but we definitely want to give you an opportunity to take it out of our hands. And if it's for you, great. And if not, that's okay. Whatever works. We just want people to come to me and say, I have a psychologist, or I have a therapist. Does that bother you? I'm like, no. If you're getting value out of that, great. If you're not, though, where else is there to go? And
It,
and we want to be that alternative if they don't
and
have
it
it.
almost becomes a when you're not.
Yeah, for most it is. It was for me,
For me
and
too.
and for a lot of our clients come to us and say, I tried therapy, I tried BetterHelp, I tried going to self-help conferences, nothing
Yeah,
stuck.
I tried the Calm app.
Yeah,
I tried meditation and
yeah,
breathing.
me too.
Yeah,
I've done the Wim Hof jumping into ice baths. I've been,
I
and we still do that. We still train under anything that's available because we want to understand what people are experiencing. I stopped reading for a while. My coach called me, Andrew McKee called and said, hey man, like what's going on? And we're chatting. He's out of Arizona and he's brilliant. If you want to check him out, there's another guy that you need to spend time with that we trust because that's where we got the understanding. And it's a great story. And so he comes, he goes, what are you reading? And I'm like, now I was an avid reader. Like I got a massive bookshelf, 400 books, that range between, self-help back to finance stuff, to magic stuff, whatever, uh, I always like to read for something I get, not for fantasy, but read I just love reading. And I was like, I paused. He goes, you're not reading anymore, are you? I said, not for the last like 6 months. I haven't picked up a book. He's like, did I ruin reading for you? I said, yes, because why would you look for your glasses if you've already found them? That's crazy. Or your keys. I understand this understanding is, and he goes, I keep reading. I was like, well, why? He goes, just don't, it goes back to what you said, don't read from need, read from knowing and understand what people are reading. And there's language there. There's always a perspective. And then, of course, we realize, well, we're not the only people speaking this language. We're the only people bringing it together. And there are, some other people that are kind of tiptoeing around this understanding of becoming aware of who we are versus, living in our psychology and our story and suffering all the time. So, we'll take all the help we can get.
sure. Yeah, what you're talking about isn't novel.
Yeah, it's not like we're the first people ever to be like, hey,
It, you,
but I look all over for this though.
right.
And so I'm like, who? Ram Dass was a popular name. That guy passed away. You look at like Tony Robbins. Well, he's NLP. That's thinking differently. And though he's helps lots of people, there's lots of people that go back every 6 months because they get hyped up and don't change. I just putting Tony Robbins on blast, and so,
Yeah,
and so
Tony, we're
yeah,
coming for you.
yeah, we got work to do. And so, there's this, so there's always pieces of it. There's always pieces of it. It's like it's dripped, and it was dripped in everywhere when I was searching for it, from self-help to religion, even to psychology and in school and the books. It's like, or at school when I was getting my degree, there's pieces, but it was never felt like enough. It was like getting an appetizer when I'm starving. We have this meeting where there's this dude that's on fire that comes to a therapy lesson. It's like, oh, and there's take an eyedropper and they go, psst. They go, there you go. See you next week. It's like, someone is on fire. They need to be doused.
Yeah.
But again, we're looking outwards and thinking information will change us. If information can do it, it ought to be found. We're very smart. As you said, our generation has the most access to information of all times. Why are we not getting better? Well, because we're looking outside.
Yes. So how does this translate into the business world? We've talked a lot about how it helps with the depression, anxiety, suicide.
Right.
How does it transition into success in business? Where do you see that showing up?
being most people can control who they are, but they influence others. They don't control others, but they start to, leadership and business owners start to, because money's involved, they want to control and will things, and then they crack and the business falls apart. So the mental health of leaders is the first thing, and being the truth of who they are allows them to just energetically shift their culture and their staff. And so we always say the best way to help people become who they are is for you to be it, or Mahatma, right? To be the change you want to see in the world. You can't change others, but you can change yourself. When you understand where to come from, leaders start to be able to communicate differently. They don't see their staff as, they don't see the stresses and all the things that get in the way. So we meet tons of people that are dealing with, they're very successful on paper, but they don't have it all. They're like, what's missing? I thought I could buy my way out of my problems. And for the most part, you can. It's nice, money does matter to a certain degree. People think money is an important subject until they can't pay their basic needs, or until a company has to close down. They got to put a bunch of people out of work before Christmas. That's like, then money matters. And so money matters, but when we become tied to these objects and things, so it allows them to detach. And people go, well, if I'm not stressed about it, they might, I'm juggling a lot of balls. They all might fall to the ground. It's like, actually, when you see yourself as what you are and you experience yourself as service, you'll not only juggle the balls, but you'll enjoy doing it more. And you'll show up to work, not through your identity, but through filling your time with something of pleasure and connecting and really being in life the way that we were meant to be experienced, not as a role of, you've met those leaders that they always give authority through position, right? To do what I say because I'm the boss, versus like, how can we create something together and trusting people. And
Yeah, personal power versus positional power. And that actually comes back full circle to what we were talking about earlier with, bad bosses,
yeah,
and how people in leadership positions affect so much of the people that
they're
work
agents of
for them.
change. Yeah,
And and imagine, going back and I think about some of the best leaders that I've had, and those leaders had very similar characteristics in that they were there to serve the team that worked for them.
what kind of characteristics did you notice in those kind of leaders?
um, an openness to feedback. So, those ones, we used to have this model that would be a 360-degree feedback. So you would pinpoint a leader, usually a mid-management level leader, and they would get feedback not just from who they work for, but who works for them. And it would all
Yeah,
be presented as one package. And the reception to that feedback was always one of two types of reception.
right,
One is, thank you, I really appreciate all of this and I can see where this applies, and I want to use it and make it better and respond accordingly and actually grow through that feedback. And the other was, fuck you.
I quit.
Yeah, this is bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't care where this came from unless it was the guy who's going to promote me.
Right. Actually, can we take a second on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little yes and, because that's a great conversation about how do we take feedback. Because in the defense of the identity, we want to block it sometimes, but also it's like, who are we taking it from? And that's the problem with those things. It's like, well, Bob doesn't barely work with me. How could he judge because he had a little intersection with me that he think, oh, this is the way this guy is. And so the first time we do this thing in a group work where it's like called gold shadow, and gold shadow. So it looks like this. They'd sit for 3 minutes and guys would sit around half circle and just tell you everything they see that's like your shadow. So like maybe you're insecure, or that that you don't believe in yourself. And I first received that experience in a group full of men out of another town that I just didn't know very well. And then they gave me my gold, which is like, a great communicator, you're caring, you're smart. And at first I was just, I didn't even hear that stuff because I was so bothered by the judgment at first. I was like, oh, and then we did it again in our own circle with men that I've journeyed with this for healing. And,
I'll
and
bet $5 it was the exact same thing.
it was, you owe me $5.
Oh,
Oh, what they said?
what they said was the exact same.
Actually, some of it, yes, because I mean, there's some things that obviously personality,
Universal,
of
yeah.
course. But the weird part for me wasn't what they said; it's how I received it. And I was like, why did it not hurt my feelings? And I was like, because I know they love me,
Mm.
and they care. And and the other thing is, when you see what's wrong with you and what's right with you, you'll notice it's almost like the yin yang. You're like, you talk too much as a shadow, and then the other side is, you're a great communicator. It's like, well, wait a second.
Yeah, what do you want from me?
Right. And then you realize that's the human experience, and you don't take feedback poorly when you know where it's coming from, and that you don't. And I also learned, be careful who you take feedback from, because you'll become them. So you don't have to take it personally. Feedback is a gift if we know how to receive, and we're not defending, again, the identity. And the moment I understand that they saw what was wrong with me and they still cared, it didn't bother me. So there's, it goes back to leadership. Yeah, it's great to be able to give feedback and take it, but no one teaches you how to receive feedback and what it's really about. And that's the difference between strategy, which is positive. We want feedback, but if we could train your staff through your leadership model how to understand it, and how when someone doesn't know, maybe you don't want to take feedback from that guy. You don't have to be defensive, because he's on his way to get a promotion. So you're like, if someone's judging you that's halfway out the door and has doesn't, then don't worry about it.
Right.
Maybe it's not
Just because
beneficial.
the feedback exists doesn't mean it has to register.
Yeah, and you don't have to take it personally, right?
Right. But there is a lot of truth in that, in the feedback that hurts.
Yes,
There's a
sometimes.
lot of truth, and whether that truth is about you or your relationship with the person giving
Perfect.
you the feedback, they say hurt people hurt people.
Right, right.
Sometimes the truth in that feedback is, I haven't done a great job at showing up to this relationship.
Yes,
And
I would say almost always,
yeah,
because anything lacking in a situation is usually what you're not giving, whether that's patience, compassion, anytime. And so it's not that that person is right or wrong. It's just, why is it affecting you? You
right,
don't have to be an effect of other people's behavior. We often think they made me feel this way. I'm like, oh, someone controls your emotions. Excellent. Wow, how much other power are you giving it? You take your power away.
right.
Yeah. So what else, by the way? You have more to say on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's an inherent confidence in your decision making abilities.
Ooh, beautiful.
So doing something right, doing something wrong, but doing something is more important. So
Oh,
so being able to make a decision and understand that it was probably the right decision, because you've got this lifelong journey of experience and learning, and you're in that position for a reason.
yeah.
And the decision you make is probably going to be the right one. But it might not be,
Yeah.
and that's okay, because you're going to learn from it,
Right.
and you're not going to lose. You're
Right.
going to learn.
Right.
But making the decision is the important part.
And what gets in the way of that?
It is fear.
A fear of what?
Fear of failure, fear
Fear of
of
being judged as a
being
failure.
judged
There it
as a
is. It goes
failure.
back to identity.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing how much all suffering comes from the defense of our identity and living an identity. And I love hearing these are great points, because every one of the things you said, it's like, wow, yeah, decision making is important. I mean, time is money in business, and people who are often unsuccessful have a hard time making choices.
right.
And it is hard to make choices, because I was always told very similar: the best choice is the right one, the second best choice is the wrong one, and the worst choice is no choice, because nothing leads to nothing. And it's true. When you don't make a choice, and leadership is, we're going this way, and I used to be called out on, I'd be like, we're going this way with all the information we had, then we make a change, and they're like, man, you're fickle. I'm like, leaders aren't, a stubborn leader will walk you off a cliff, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
there
only
used to
making.
be lemmings.
So look how that shows up in just your life outside of leadership. For people listening that are not in that position, it's about, wow, what if I make a choice and it's the wrong one? I'll hurt people, and I'm a bad person, and they get tied into indecision in life, rather than trying and not worrying about knowing that you'll make the best choice. So when people down the road, this is where it comes, really hits home for people. People down the road will look back on their life choice and go, I wish I made a different decision. I was like, well, if we had a time machine and went back and visited that person, and you didn't know anything, but you had to make the same choice based off that situation, that's the choice you would have made, because that was the best choice for you at the time, even if it was a bad choice in the hindsight. In other words, you're not making bad choices. Even you might have made a choice you felt was bad even in the moment, but that was what you had to do to get through. And so we stop regretting our past because, well, I could have done better. Well, yeah, the current version of you that has an understanding could do better. I felt that way for a long time about my
With your
relationships and things I've
time
done.
changed perspective, you
Yes.
could have done better.
Welcome growth. If
Yeah.
you ever look over your shoulder and say, man, I was so much better back then, I'm like, something's gone wrong
Yeah,
for
you're
you.
upside down in your
Yeah.
experience. That funnel needs to
Yeah, life
flip
is,
over.
you need many coaches.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's I love that. That's such great. Anything else, man? That's great.
Yeah. So confidence in your decision making abilities.
Brilliant.
Being willing to accept and deploy feedback, and then the last one was, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a form of charisma, and that charisma which allowed you to be influential with the people who wanted to follow you.
Take a second on that. That's good. I like this. Take a second when you say that charisma. I think that you're bang on because I see that in people. We've all met those people that we meet and we're like, I like this guy. Why? Or this person. They're just influent, like just, and they influence so easily. What do you think they have in common? What is it? What is it really that you're experiencing in them? I'll give you three guesses.
I'm seeing in them what I want to have in myself,
Beautiful. What is that?
and it's almost like a joie de vivre, like a
So what do you think it is?
it's
How would you describe it?
it's a lightness, it's a happiness, it's confidence.
Hey, Jeff,
Hey, hi.
what is it?
A light?
Yeah, what you know why you're having a hard time describing it?
No, why?
Because it's like describing the taste of salt without saying salty.
Oh yeah.
It goes back to trying
It's
to
what
find
the
words.
French call a certain I don't know what.
We call the truth of who you are, and we go back to the three guesses, which should have been identity, identity, identity. When a person doesn't live in the mask, you witness them for who they are, and you think, oh, it's fun to be around that guy. I feel safe.
That's super cool. Yeah.
It goes back to what the work is like when you remove every all three things you saw in a leader was like identity, identity, identity. Right, the removal of identity allows people to show up true. Because Brene Brown says you need to practice authenticity, which sounds like the most contradictory thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Practice being unrehearsed. Wait a second.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so when you can let go of the story and you show up at work just as you, well, then you will be service, then you will be the light, then you will be love, then you will be forgiveness, then you will be understanding, and you will be action based, and you won't be afraid to make decisions, and you're able to take feedback and give it from a place of compassion and for yourself and others. And that's where we can help leaders get to help their staff, because when they become that, people go, and that's how mentors are born.
So what you're saying, everything we've talked about in this understanding, this program, this experience, that is the experiencing the truth of who you are. While we've approached it up until now as the catch-all cure-all for depression, anxiety, burnout, suicide, all of those things, is actually also just the secret recipe to being successful in your workplace if you are
Yeah,
in any form of a
I'm
leadership
so
position.
afraid to answer this question, but I'm not, because I'm me. To avoid sounding arrogant or hubris, all boats rise with the tide. Psychologists and people who want to change their thinking look at each problem individually and try to solve them. But, when my coach Andrew said, when you look at the root of all problems, you can see that they can all be solved with the same understanding, that all suffering comes from a couple things. One is your identity and living in that. And that means really you're thinking and you're not that. And the second thing is believing things should be different than they are. And when you accept reality on the outside as it is, and you understand to come from a place inside that's not your identity, life unfolds differently for people. And so this isn't our opinion, it's just what we witness. So, yes, it has healed people from traumas and depression, suicide, made better leaders. That's why our work is so unique and different. We have so many unique coaches to have that kind of life experience. But my experience has always been with leadership and burnout because, as you, I was a corporate guy, and I was working hard to run away from the fears of not having.
So, am I out of line to put out a challenge? Like you talked about the 20 or 30 people that are going to experience this. Thank you for being
Yeah,
one of the
exactly.
20 or 30 people
We're
that'll
here for
experience
you though,
this.
because you know what, the gratitude I have for anyone watching this, because if it starts with you. We're not trying to change a billion lives at a billion times, one time. I want to look at the camera and say, you could be the person that can receive help and change the lives of the people around you. I had a guy out the East Coast with me today, and he's like, "Why would you invest time with me?" I said, "Because I don't have a guy in New Brunswick that's a black sheep, and black sheep change lives just by their presence. And I know that investing in that guy is going to make a difference in the circle around him. Why would I not help somebody who's going to help others? It's not everyone is on the search, but if they're on the search, yes, yeah, it's
Okay, so then I want to extend a challenge, like a positive, fun challenge, not to you, because I know you'll show up, but out of the people watching, there's somebody out there that's in an executive level or management level position at work that understands that they have maybe a leader working for them or a leader working above them, or adjacent to, that uh, could and would benefit from having a slightly different perspective from anything that we just talked about today, that it would benefit them, which would cascade and benefit the rest of your team. You know, my company is all about helping companies grow, and I can tell you that implementing this style of leadership into any size of company will help that company grow. So my challenge would be is reaching out and taking that one meeting with Morgan and understanding that at the end of that, if you think it's the right way, which you will, but
Or won't.
or it won't,
Yeah, that's okay.
but take the meaning and
Yeah, we just want an opportunity to share that.
and rather than looking at this from a simply, curing depression, anxiety, whatever, look at it as a leadership growth opportunity.
Yeah.
That that the magic that I just described, all of my favorite mentors and leaders throughout my corporate history,
They have
can
that
be
base.
learned.
Yes. Or experienced, because learn makes it sound like it's information, but and that's where most leaders say, well, we do leadership training. I'm like, yeah, I know. You learn strategies and you learn concepts and they feel good. And then they're implemented and people don't buy in. And it's because you're not living it and you're not being the truth. Again, the best way to help other people be what you want them to be is not to tell them they need to change, but to make them feel safe enough that they can change and that you can be that place for them. You are that safe space, for lack of better words.
You know, what would be the coolest program for us to try?
Well, I'm up to anything. What do you got?
Oh my god! All right, here's a one-time offer for any small business in Kingston who
Yeah.
has a sales staff, so preferably a retail business that is looking to go into Christmas season
Oh, yes.
and needs support in terms of leadership and life guidance
Yeah. Get rid of the stress.
and
Get rid.
sales
Yeah. Sales.
support.
Yes.
That we will come out and put on a session for you.
Yeah. For nothing.
Where for nothing.
Yeah. We'll do it
for a testimonial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like as an experiment where we teach out the head, heart, and hands. I'll come in and teach the sales strategy, the how to talk to clients, how to approach customers, and how to accessorize and maximize your deals for profitability.
And I'll teach you how not to let your identity get in the way so that you can serve without fear.
I jump on that.
Let's do it for ourselves right now.
Oh, I think we are.
Yeah. I would love to serve our community that way. That's in the spirit of Christmas for sure.
Okay, I'm in.
All right, deal.